Hello everyone watching. I am Commissioner Zoe Metcalfe. I'm the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for North Yorkshire and York. Welcome to my public accountability meeting for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. So we'll turn to the agenda, and agenda item 1, there are no apologies. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting and actions. Well, there's no actions, but the minutes from the previous meeting are recorded and published onto my OPFCC website where you can find them. Agenda item 3. Now, we don't have any questions from the public. So I want to make sure that everybody watching gets the most out of this session. So if you would like to ask us a question in live time during the meeting, you can follow us on Twitter on North York's PFCC and reply to us, or use the hashtag NYScrutiny, or you can email us directly on info@northyorkshire-pfcc.gov.uk. And we will address those questions at agenda item 6. Right, we're going to go on to the presentation. So this is the presentation of a response to the HMICFRS report. So I'm going to hand over to the Chief Fire Officer, Jonathan Dyson.
Commissioner, and welcome to everybody in the meeting and members of the public. I think today is an extremely important meeting, and it's our opportunity to provide assurance to members of the public and to yourself, Commissioner, on the service's position in relation to the recent HMICFRS inspection. Now, I'll reiterate what I said over in the interviews earlier in the week, which is, if you're a member of the public, you're opening your phone or your newspaper and you see that your local fire service has an inadequate rating, it would rightly cause you concern. You may even be angry around that, being a taxpayer. And of course, the responsibility lies with SLT and me directly into that. What I can assure members of the public, and all assurance, is that this report dates back to May of last year. And since taking control of the service in July, we've made significant progress. And I think that's the most important part that we feature on here, because whilst we were discussing this with the press, naturally the concern was around, will I receive a response from the fire service if I make a 999 call? And you absolutely will. Whilst the grades of inadequate and requires improvement bring an emotive response out in people, the detail within the report actually provides an extremely good amount of information and support for the service in everything that our organisation is doing. And again, I do reflect upon the impact that this has on our staff, our on-call staff, our prevention and protection, everybody that we serve and our stakeholders, because this isn't a reflection on them. We are all part of the solution, and that's extremely important to remember, that we've all got work to do within this. But again, our on-call firefighters in the remote and rural locations, providing their time away from families as they do to protect their communities. Once again, I applaud them and I support them and thank them for their support of the service and for what they're doing within there. And that's across all our staff. We must recognise their achievements within this. But of course, we've work to do. We've a lot to make progress upon. And my colleague Damien, who is the Director of Service Improvement and Assurance for the organisation, will give the public an in-depth look at what the report says, what the service is doing, and you will, I am confident, be assured by close of where we are. But I will always reiterate that the service is open to challenge, we're open to comment, and if people want to visit stations or even SLT in that context, then we will, of course, make ourselves available for those discussions. Just before I hand over to Damien, Damien joined us recently from the HMICFRS themselves, so the Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire. Damien was the Chief of Staff within that department, so he brings an extreme amount of wealth out of information, of experience, and ultimately for the service, also direction where we need to go from there. Now, whilst recognising that it is a report, there is a reflection that it is a bad report. We understand that, and we understand the language in there. The key factor that we will draw out from this is that the service has made improvements, and when Damien goes through the detail of those, again, if there are specific points, please, members of the public, do send the message into the Commissioner, and we'll answer where you feel you need extra assurance or any other points on there. Commissioner, thank you, and I'll hand over to Damien.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioner. As I go through the report today, as Jonathan has done, he's gone through the summary of the report, and what I will do is just go through in more detail about each of the section, the sections within the report, the progress that we've made, and the detail within that. I will also look and just provide some introduction and background on HMICFRS, just for understanding by the public. So, just as background, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, they've been the independent inspectorate for police forces for well over 100 years. And in 2017, they took over additional responsibility for fire and rescue services. Within North Yorkshire Fire, this is actually our third inspection and the second time that HMICFRS have actually inspected us in what they call their rounded assessment of performance in the areas of effectiveness, efficiency and people. Our first inspection was in 2018 and 2019, and then we had a second inspection in 2020 looking at our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As I've suggested, the inspection gives us a rounded assessment and a grading in the three areas listed there: how effective we are, how efficient we are as a fire and rescue service, and how well we look after our people. With that, HMICFRS, they will look at the areas. There's actually 11 questions that cover those three pillar areas, and they will give us a graded judgment at pillar level and also against each of the questions. As you can see, these range from an inadequate grading all the way up through requires improvement, good, up to the top grading, which is outstanding. Also within the report, HMICFRS identify certain areas as areas for improvement. As people read the report, they will see that these are highlighted in the report, and this is where an area of business hasn't reached the expected standard, and it is an area that HMICFRS would like the fire and rescue service to focus on. If they identify a serious, critical or systemic area where it's fallen below the expected standard, they will issue a cause of concern. A cause of concern will always be accompanied by one or more recommendations. And as a service, we need to respond to these recommendations within a set period, and we need to establish an action plan on how we're going to address or mitigate these areas. Also, if a service is not responding to a cause of concern, or it is not succeeding in mitigating or resolving the area, a service may be moved into an enhanced phase of monitoring, which is called Engage. There's currently 2 services that are in the Engage phase of monitoring in England, and that is Gloucestershire Fire and Rescue Service and London Fire Brigade. So when we come to look at our performance, and as the Chief has quite rightly said, on first sight, it is a disappointing picture. For the effectiveness pillar, we received a grading of requires improvement. For efficiency, an inadequate grading, and also for people, that was an inadequate grading as well. As I've suggested, that is at pillar level, but there are 11 diagnostic questions that form part of each of those pillars. So there's 5 questions within effectiveness, 2 within efficiency, and 4 within people. And we also get a grading at that level. I think that's important to say at this time, because actually as we move into our next inspection, which is probably going to be in another 2 years, in sort of autumn winter period 2024, to align with the police inspections, those pillar gradings will be removed. So we'll only get gradings at the 11 diagnostic questions level. We've also been issued 2 causes of concern, and the inspectorate identified one area of promising practice within the service. So as you can see there, the causes of concern were to make sure we have the right workforce skills and capabilities that we need, and to have robust processes to ensure that transformation activities provide efficiency and effectiveness. That second cause of concern was originally worded differently, but following detailed and constructive dialogue with HMICFRS, that second cause of concern was revised into the wording that you see on the screen before you now. Our promising practice, and this is quite a relatively new initiative for HMICFRS, and there hasn't been very high numbers of promising practice across all 44 fire and rescue services in this round of inspections. So it is very pleasing that North Yorkshire Fire has received a promising practice within the report, and this is based around and is in relation to our public safety officers. The PSO scheme has been piloted and carried out in partnership with North Yorkshire Police and also the Yorkshire Ambulance Service. And this was met very favourably by the inspectorate, and also the way in which we have evaluated that scheme to demonstrate the efficiency savings that it suggests on this slide, and also that social return on investment for the cost that we're actually paying for the PSO scheme. On this slide, quite simply, it's the graded judgments for each of the areas. So as I suggested, at pillar level, which are the questions in bold of effectiveness, efficiency and people, we did get the grades of requires improvement, inadequate and inadequate. But actually, where you look across the 11 diagnostic questions, we received grades of 7, requires improvement, 2 goods and 2 inadequate grades. So sorry, I won't be a second. Sorry, Commissioner, I'm just coming out there because there is an updated slide that I need to share with you. Apologies for that. Hopefully you can actually see the slide now. So on these next slides, I will go through some of the detail within the report. And what I would suggest, I would urge everybody to actually read the report in full. The grades are there for everybody to see, but actually the narrative within the report, I think there is some balance to the narrative, and hopefully as I go through each of the sections, you will see some of that balance within the narrative. So understanding risk, which is 1.1 of the inspection. Much of this section of the report focuses on how a fire and rescue services integrated risk management plan directs their activity, and that's activity across prevention, protection and response. And during the time of our inspections, the inspectors assessed our performance based upon our last integrated risk management plan. And actually, since that point, we have introduced the community risk profile and also our risk and resource model. And we are confident that these new strategic documents will mitigate many of the issues which have been identified within the report, which was assessing our performance against the previous IRMP. The inspectors did actually recognise within this section of the report that the service has improved how it gathers and shares risk information. And I think this will be further improved when they come back into service, when they start reviewing the work we've done to establish the new risk and resource model. With regards prevention, this is a key priority for the Chief, the service and yourself, Commissioner, and it is really pleasing that the inspectors recognised our commitment to keeping our communities safe and feeling safe. And in this section, we received a grading of good within the report. Some of the quotes from within the report: the inspectors said that we work well with others to prevent fires and other emergencies, but we do need to improve the way in which we evaluate and quality assure our activity. As the Chief suggested at the start of the presentation, a number of areas that the inspectorate look at are based around policy, procedure and practice, rather than solely focusing on the delivery and the way in which our staff and colleagues work within those communities. When we look at the next section, protection, this section assesses how we regulate business fire safety, so how we work with buildings, commercial, industrial buildings, and regulate fire safety within those. The risk-based inspection programme for HMICFRS is one of their primary focus for inspectors in this section. The report itself identified that at the time of inspection, that we need to ensure that we are auditing all high and very high risk properties and not just a sample of those properties. We are committed to ensuring that all identified high and very high risk properties are audited as part of our RBIP, and work has been undertaken to do that, and our risk-based inspection programme does set a commitment for us to review all identified high and very high within a specific time frame. We have already invested in more specialist roles within protection to ensure that we meet our commitments, but there is much within the report that reads very, very positive. Our enforcement action, our consultation under new buildings, and the work that we are doing to reduce automatic fire alarms is commented positively about within the report. For the other sections of effectiveness, so in response, this is how we respond to fires and other emergencies. I think it's important to point out for the public that the inspection and the inspectors do not actually physically assess how we respond to incidents. They don't go out and monitor an incident, but they focus on the policies, practice and procedures that surround that response. We accept the areas we need to improve within response, but we want to make it clear that this is not a reflection on our committed and dedicated firefighters. Inspectors have recognised that staff have a good understanding of how to command incidents safely, but the report states that we respond flexibly, but our response availability is a challenge, and it is critical that we have not set any response standards at the time of inspection. It also stated that we do not always have the minimum number of fire engines available. So this is the areas surrounding our response, but the inspectorate were not critical about firefighters and incident commanders when they respond to the calls that we get each and every day. With regards major and multi-agency incidents, this was another part of the inspection where we received a good grading from the inspectorate. The report states that we have some arrangements in place to respond to major and multi-agency incidents, and that we work well with other fire and rescue services. But we do need to improve our cross-border exercising, and we need to make sure that staff can access risk information for our neighbouring services if we get called to an incident across our border. Positively again, it was commented on within the report that our staff demonstrate a good understanding of joint working principles, and the service is also an active member of the local resilience forum, working closely with our partners. So within effectiveness, as the Chief quite rightly said, the inspection was about 8 months ago, and we have already made some changes in the way that we deliver our prevention, protection and response. In line with the fire and rescue plan and the risk and resource model, we have increased the number of personnel in our protection department to prioritise this work. Further resources will be aligned to this area, and as I've said, that is suggested within our risk and resource model. A review of our fire cover model has begun, which uses our recently established community risk profile. This will ensure that we have the right resources in the right place at the right time. We are also analysing data against speed, strength and safety of our response to create performance measures which are meaning for the public, and that the public and yourself, Commissioner, can hold us to account over. Our Firewatch system has been upgraded, and we've facilitated a trial of our availability app, which will make it easier for our on-call staff to tell us when they are available, which does address one of the issues which was raised by the inspectorate on ensuring that we have maximum availability wherever possible. We have reinvigorated and strengthened our over-the-border exercise programme, which was disrupted during COVID, to ensure that we work effectively and efficiently with our neighbouring fire and rescue services when needed. So with regards to the second pillar on efficiency, the two sections here are making best use of our resources and future affordability. We did receive a cause of concern within making best use of our resources, and that was that the service doesn't have in place robust processes to ensure that transformation activities provide efficiency and effectiveness. The inspectors reflected that the service's financial position is precarious, and we need to improve how we manage and evaluate our collaboration activities. However, they did state that we are making steps to improve our productivity and manage our performance, and the service is developing its business continuity policy. With regards to future affordability, the inspectors reported that the service has a sound understanding of its future financial challenges, but its ability to mitigate its main or significant financial risks are limited. We were criticised within the report for not having a fleet strategy or a plan, but we were commended for investing in technology and working with others to support change and to improve our efficiency. The inspectors also stated that the service makes best use of its external funding. When we look at actions and a look forward, we have already implemented an established programme management framework, and this is to allow us to deliver our transformation programme, and this will deliver our anticipated outcomes, and we're looking to achieve maximum value for money. Since the report, we have now signed off our fleet strategy. This has been jointly developed with North Yorkshire Police. The Fleet Service is planning to make investments in technology which will allow us to provide a better service. Now coming on to the third pillar, which is how we look after our people. In the first diagnostic question, which is values and culture, disappointingly, the inspectors stated that service values aren't always consistently demonstrated at all levels, and that senior managers need to be more visible and demonstrate values through their behaviours. They also commented that we should have processes in place to make sure that staff don't work excessive hours, and they were critical of our absence management process. They did, however, acknowledge that we have effective support systems to improve and support staff's mental and physical well-being. Within the next section, which is right people and right skills, which looks at workforce planning, organisational and management training, this is where we received our second cause of concern. And this stated that the service doesn't have in place adequate workforce planning processes. The inspectors also raised the impact of having a high number of STEM staff in temporary promotion positions during the inspection, and they had a need for us to address this. They also stated that we should make sure we have an effective, accurate and accessible system for recording and monitoring of staff training. And they commented that learning and development needs to improve, but acknowledged that the service was self-aware around this and does have plans in place to make those improvements. With regards fairness and diversity, the inspectors said that we need to improve how we seek and act upon staff feedback, and we should make improvements in the way that we collect equality data to better understand the needs of our workforce. We also need to review our approach to tackling bullying, harassment and discrimination. But they did state that we have made some progress in relation to ED&I, equality, diversity and inclusion, but we need to improve the way in which we use equality impact assessments or people impact assessments. The final section of the report is regarding managing performance and developing leaders, and this looks at talent management and succession planning. The report states that we should put in place an open and fair process to identify, develop and support our high potential staff and those with aspirations to move into leadership roles. The service should make its selection, development and promotion processes for staff open and fair. And we need to ensure that the focus is for all staff groups, including career progression for our enabling functions. So with regards the actions and look forward for the people pillar and what we've already implemented, the service has implemented the National Core Code of Ethics. These ethics run through everything that we do and are becoming embedded in our day-to-day practices. Our Firewatch system has been upgraded. This will allow us to monitor the time our staff work to better support their welfare and address the area identified by the inspection. This will also help us monitor the training of our staff more easily, ensuring that we have the right staff in the right places with the skills that they need to be able to do their job. Our absence management process has been redesigned, and it's currently going through a period of consultation before we put it out for trial. We are partway through our promotions programme, which will bring added stability to the service. We now have in place a permanent senior leadership team, and the applications and information regarding our group manager process went live this week. We also have a new leadership development programme which is being developed, and this is supported through a recently launched coaching and mentoring programme. This will align to the NFCC leadership framework. So with regards our organisational assurance, scrutiny and the next steps, the cause of concerns which were issued as part of this report are being addressed through a dedicated action plan. The progress against the action plan is monitored through our governance groups of tactical leadership and strategic leadership teams, and also is presented at executive board. Any exceptions are specifically highlighted and discussed in these meetings. The cause of concern and all of the other areas of improvement which HMICFRS identified are also tracked through the Risk and Assurance Board, where detailed scrutiny is placed against each of the associated actions. We will also, now that we have received the published report, be having a HMICFRS Service Improvement Action Plan where we can monitor the progress against the desired outcomes for all of the areas for improvement and some of the other negative commentary that's within the text of the report. An additional meeting was established to separate the task and tactical elements, and also we will welcome back the inspectors from HMICFRS into service at the start of next week, where they will revisit the cause of concern and they will publish a letter informing us of our progress. They will look at areas such as the governance that we have in place, the scrutiny of the action plan, the process and the delivery of our action plan, and any early indications of improvement that we have made since the inspection. We expect the next full inspection to be in the autumn or winter in 2024. And as a senior leadership team, we are confident that we will have made significant and sustained improvements by that time. I'd like to thank you, and myself and the Chief are happy to take any questions.
Commissioner, if I may, I'll just very quickly summarise there. Thank you for what was an in-depth look at the report there, and we make no apology for going in depth there. It was important that we presented to the public just all the aspects of the report, because behind the greys there is a significant amount of work which goes in, and in the 6 months since taking over and the newly formed SLT, I'm sure you agree we have made significant progress, and that's the key factor for the communities and the public. That progress isn't stopping. We have a back to basics approach to make sure that we are building an organisation foundation up on solid foundations to now deliver what they need. They will, of course, as our assurance, always receive a response.
Oh, Jonathan, you've just dropped off. I'm afraid we can't hear that end bit there.
Response through a 5-minute.
I don't know if you want to try and come back in.
So once again, we've got IT issues, Commissioner. What was that? Sorry.
We missed like the last minute of what you were saying there.
No problem. In short, Commissioner, it was assurance to the public that once again, whilst they can see the progress we've made in this report, the reflection is that the service provides an excellent service to the community. We provide competent firefighters, a competent response, and we will always deliver at incidents whenever the public need us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jonathan, and to Damien too for a very in-depth report there. And I can only echo everything that you both have said. And I think it's really important that I tell you as Commissioner what I've done over the last year to support the service to improve. I've appointed a new senior leadership team with a chief and a new deputy chief fire officer too. I've worked with and supported the chief to implement last year a rigorous ongoing programme of improvement and have deepened my office scrutiny to support this process and will continue to hold the service to account for delivery of this. I have also approved in September last year a new risk and resource model for delivery of the service too. I am confident that marked improvements have already been made, and I would like to thank the Chief Officer and his team for their commitment to drive improvement in all areas addressed by the HMICFRS in their report. I have also been successful in lobbying government for fairer funding through the preset flexibility also. As I said, significant improvements have been made to the fire service, and I would like to thank the staff and firefighters that continue to keep our communities safe, and they have my full support in helping them to improve the service going forward. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. That's great. So we'll move on to our agenda item 5, which is the performance update. And James, I think we're coming to you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I shall just share my screen. Okay, so I'm presenting the pack this month, which is the reporting period of September to November 2022. If we look at the first slide here, this is about our incident demand. So these are the number of calls we've received from the public who need our assistance. If you look at the top left-hand quarter of the page, that graph is telling us that we've had a small reduction in our demand over the last 3 months, and that's to be expected over that period into November, where the weather's getting wetter, shall we say, and we see a slight drop off in our demand during that time. If you look at the lower quarter of the page on the left-hand side, that is the yearly indicator for our incident demand. You'll see at the bottom there in 2022, we had less calls, but that is accountable to the COVID pandemic, and where we saw demand reduce significantly during that time. And what you can see is that that has now returned to levels we saw before the pandemic. I'll move this on to the next slide. This is about our top 10 incident types within that demand. And you'll see on the left-hand side about our false alarm calls. They are pretty static. We'll talk a little bit more about those in the slides in a moment. The other two areas I'd like to draw your attention to is fires in the open. So again, we know we had an increase in that area earlier in the year due to the good weather. What we can say in these figures that has returned to normal levels of what we would expect. And again, we are pre-planning for that dry weather again next year to prevent again any increase in those types of fires. The other area that I'd like to draw your attention to is assisting other agencies. We continue to see that gradually rise over time, over sustained time, and that is due to the demand on our ambulance colleagues, and we know some of the challenges that they're facing, and we continue to be required to assist in medical type emergencies. And so that is something that we will continue to monitor of how we attend those types of incidents. So I mentioned the false alarms a moment ago, and if we look at a little bit deeper into that, they are pretty static. We know on a monthly basis, we report against these figures and how we can reduce that. We did launch a 4-stage process shortly before Christmas, which was increasing the level of engagement that we have with owners and responsible people of those buildings, ranging from that increased initial engagement for our crews when they first attend, right the way up to the other end of the scale, where we would potentially take enforcement action against those individuals who don't believe are taking appropriate measures to reduce those false alarms. So, of course, we have some more significant changes also to come through the RRM implementation. We can say that that project has been launched now, that part of the project. And we're looking to deliver that by the 1st of April this year. And that includes the things around as well, extending the hours and the times where we don't ascend to certain premises types, those premises types that we class as lower risk. And where we know that there are likely to be people available to put that backup call into fire control to confirm if there was a fire. That leaves our fire appliances available to do the other critical work that they need to do and not attend these false alarms. But again, to give the public that reassurance that we'll continue to attend any high risk premises, particularly where people are sleeping at any time of the day. We've also begun our fire cover model review, which is a bit about how and the type of response that we would send to certain automatic fire alarms, and look forward to what the data tells us and the evidence around that and some of the solutions we can put in place.
James, can I just interrupt that
Yes.
false alarms, they're going to be a focus of the PAM next month, aren't they? So we'll be able to go in depth then.
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner. So this next slide really demonstrates that there is a link to the time of year as well with some of our false alarms. I've mentioned this before around the fact that during the warmer months we have other causes. People leave doors open, which allows sometimes cooking materials to spread to an accidental actuation. Building works also carried out, and also certain insects during the warmer months get into those systems. So again, we're being preventative in that space and increasing the level of engagement with owners to reduce where we can. This slide, really what I wanted to highlight here was the orange section on the right hand side, that we have a large amount of residential type false alarms, and that's not just obviously for our commercial premises. Therefore, we're targeting that through the safe and well visits. We obviously focused during this period and across Christmas about the cost of living crisis, and we included that in our community safety work that we're doing right now to reduce that number and to educate homeowners to how they can appropriately look after their equipment and refresh that at low cost. If I take us on then to our overall fire cover. So this is the number of times, or the percentage of time, that our fire appliances are available within our fire cover model, if you like. So we have various different categories that explain where we are. So we've got a maximum in the blue, optimum in green, minimum in orange, and then red in critical. And it's really to give some reassurance to the public around this, that we ensure that we send appropriate levels of assistance to people who need it through a 4-stage approach. So we first of all do a pre-planning around availability, which is done on districts by our district managers to look ahead and pre-plan where we can see any gaps, to fill those gaps through various different methods. Then we have what's called our operational staffing reserve. So these are a group of people who will go out into various stations to increase that availability and put fire appliances back on the run. And then we have a third part of that is our fire control. So closer to the time on the day, they will look strategically across our area to ensure that the fire appliances are spread appropriately, to ensure people get the service that they deserve. And then fourthly, it's about our duty silver officer, who gives that some professional judgment there if required, to again move resources around if necessary. But there has been a development there around the service, and what we provide, the tools that we provide, both we'll be providing to our fire control and to our duty silver operators, with some live feeds, so that those upgrades that you saw we talked about earlier on with our Firewatch system is enabling us now to have a live feed of people's availability, which has also helped feed the availability app that Damien mentioned earlier on, that is being trialled at Labourn Fire Station. That trial is being rolled out against two other fire stations, both at Helmsley and at Skipton. So a multi-pump station there at Skipton and Helmsley with that has a light rescue pump, to make sure that it's absolutely robust before we then roll that out across the rest of the county at the end of March. So again, we should help improve that picture. Moving on to the next slide then. So this gives a more detailed look at our fire stations, in particular our on-call stations. This, we have to say, is before any cover moves are put in place. So those 4 arrangements that I talked about earlier around moving resources around and supplementing stations to improve their availability. This is before that. With the fire watch upgrade, we are getting nearer to be able to look at and analyse the data after those moves have taken place. But this is what I've got for you today. We know systemically that we have some challenges around the officers in charge and driving skills, if you like, and how we can encourage our on-call staff to take part in those roles. Because of the number of hours that are required to take from their primary employment in order to fulfil the requirements of the role and the training that's involved. We've got some fire standards which are standards put in place across the UK to ensure that we train our people at the highest level, and also certainly from a driving point of view, it's built into statute the number of hours that they're required to drive in order to train and drive those vehicles under blue lights. And that has caused us some problems, and we continue to find solutions to make that more attractive to our on-call colleagues, and also innovative ways of how they can achieve that and break some of that up in a more flexible way.
James, can I just ask a question, please? Because obviously there has been a dip on-call availability in certain stations, which is disappointing. But, you know, I hear what you're trying to do to encourage that availability to go up. But, you know, how long do you leave it? Because there has to be a time frame on this before you take the next set of actions, if that's appropriate. So what kind of support, you know, how long do you leave it for? And then what's the next layer of support that goes on? Because obviously you won't want to leave it like this. And I know that availability does fluctuate, doesn't it? But there are some stations that on-call availability is low and stays quite low. So it's to give assurance around that piece. Yeah. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to come in on that. You've got your hand up.
Thanks, Commissioner. This is we're suffering more items. Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
This is ultimately all linked to our community risk profile and the risk and resource model. Now we've started and we have this model in place. It's a data-driven model. So ultimately, we have to recognise that we need to serve all of our communities, but our risk model that hasn't changed for a significant period of time now needs to dynamically change as much as we can within our financial envelope and risk envelope in the future. So all of these stations where we have challenges with crewing or other areas or other aspects of the crew and their appliances and drivers, it's incumbent upon the organisation to do everything we humanly can to make sure we support that community and put a resource in place. But ultimately, and as some services have already done and nationally seeing the issue, If we get to a point where it's no longer feasible to maintain that resource, then that is a conversation we have to have with the public and the local communities in that area. Nobody wants to go to those extremes, so that's why the service will do everything in between there to make sure that we do increase this availability. We work with the officers and drivers to increase their availability and the skill sets that's available to them. And the background to this, of course, is how we train firefighters, the number of courses we make available, and the access across the organisation. So there's much more that we are doing. We'll continue to do those and to monitor it. And this will ultimately then link into the risk and resource model in the next iteration after 24-25 as to what the resourcing across the county looks like. Thank you.
Thanks, JD. Over to you now, James.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Commissioner. So yeah, just to build on that, really, we do run quarterly recruits courses, and what I can say is we do aim to have those full. At the moment they are full, and getting good numbers, success rate that are going through there, but of course we want to retain those staff, and that's what we continue to try to do with that Firewatch app that we talked about, and making it easier for those recruits by having everything in one place, which is something again that we started at the end of last year, which is we're receiving really good feedback around. If I move this on then. So this next slide really tells us about the availability balanced against demand. So what we've talked about before, and this demonstrates, is that we have high demand at certain times where we have low availability. So again, some of the proposals there that are being pushed through as the first phase of the risk and resource model, for example, at Harrogate and Scarborough around peak demand pump, so taking that tactical response vehicle out and putting it in a B-type appliance, which would be fully crewed during those peak times, is one of those solutions. But as Jonathan already mentioned, there's much more work that we're doing around that through our fire cover model review as part of the service improvement. This next slide then talks about our protection activity. So this is our business fire safety as such. If I draw your attention to the top line in bold, which is the totals, if I look across each of the districts there as a whole, that's proportionate to where I would the risk is and the resource is for each of those districts, which is a positive indicator. If I could draw your attention to the bottom right quarter, which is the regulatory activity. So this is the number of fire safety audits that we do, both by specialist staff and our firefighters on station. So when Damien spoke earlier on about a risk-based inspection programme, these are the figures that would contribute to that against our highest risk premises. And that is a real healthy, steady number. We're getting numbers that are really solid every month in those areas. If I draw your attention to the box above that, which is about guidance, you'll see. Sorry, did somebody want to come in there?
No, it's okay.
No. You will see in September we had a really high activity. In the following months, not so much. Well, the reason for that is that that was included our Business Fire Safety Week. So during that period, as I'd mentioned before, is we go out and give advice to our more remote areas that has business that are not always high risk. They are sometimes medium risk or low risk. So we, as Damien mentioned earlier on, we would audit our very high risk and high risk premises, but we want to make sure that we still make contact with those people who we don't normally get to see during that Business Fire Safety Week, and give advice out and just reassure people that they're doing the right thing. I'll take us on then to the prevention activity. So this is a lot more around our community safety activity. So again, I'll draw your attention to the bold text, which is the totals. Again, proportionate to the risk with the exception of York and Selby there, we have identified during that time that this is an area that could improve. That's a reduced performance during that time, and that's attributed to some change in staff. And we would look to see those figures return to normal in the next reporting period. If I draw your attention down to the bar charts then at the bottom, on the left-hand side, our safe and well visits. Well, I can say that this is a small increase from the total number from last month, and we are seeing now our on-call stations now taking more part in these activities, which is exactly what we need in those in more remote areas. On the right-hand side, you'll see again the proportionality of the types of campaign that we run, and I can say that youth engagement and road safety was again on the increase. We've slightly flexed there and reduced our number of water safety activities, but they're started to increase now and working towards our wildfire engagement. So this is exactly the sort of time now that we need to get in nice and early for those landowners that are looking to and potentially burn for the purposes of maintaining their land, and also people who are again going to come into the Easter period and maybe start going out and doing things outside. So it's exactly the right time now to get ahead of that curve and try and keep that number down that we saw last year because of the dry weather.
James, can I ask you a question about the safe and well visits? Yes. Are you on track with your internal targets? Is there any backlog in any of the districts?
Not that has been highlighted by exception to myself, Commissioner. I'll seek further reassurance and report to you next month on that. But there's certainly nothing been raised by exception. And what I can say is that I've looked at those figures for both last quarter and this quarter, and they have increased again. And last quarter, they'd increased on the quarter before. So these are going up. What I can say, we've also got the new SafeLinks piece of software that ensures that it flags anything that is exceeding the timescales that we've set in our policy. So again, that should be being flagged if not. So I will reiterate, nothing has been raised by exception, and that we should be on track for everything that we've set in policy around the expected timescales, and that is based upon risk. So those people who are more vulnerable would receive a safe and well visit in a shorter space of time, more urgently than those who are less risk. But there's still, like I say, a very short timescale for all of those. As soon as we get that referral, we get out there and get them done.
Can I ring Jonathan in, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think it's just important to reflect that the public and the office will see a change in the performance framework and the matrix that we report to you in the coming months. Our new head of service delivery and training is delivering a performance framework for the service, which will be assured by the Director of Service Improvement and Assurance. So we've got that feedback loop. We need to focus our activity to make sure it is tailored towards the risk and vulnerability within the county, and of course then supporting that through training of competency for our firefighters. Our performance framework will deliver that, and that will then be reported into the new packs in PAM in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Commissioner, unless there's any questions.
I don't think there are any further questions, but thank you, James. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, okay, so agenda item 6, which is questions from the public. Now, I think we've had a couple of comments on Twitter, which I've seen, and there was one question about, can we not get back to face-to-face meetings, which is a really good question. More than happy to consider this. Maybe that's something we'll look at. So let me take that one away and see if we can get that organised. So agenda item 7, any other business? So I believe, Simon Dennis, you have a point to make under this agenda item.
Well, Commissioner, I do, and I'm conscious that there are a number of members of the public who watch both of your thematic public accountability meetings on the same day, and those that watched the early one in relation to North Yorkshire Police will know that we spent a little while discussing the police complaints regime, and in particular the service that's offered within the Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner in relation to police complaints. And just in case that's a matter of interest either to the particular viewer who raised the police-themed question, or more generally, I thought I might just take the opportunity to mention that the team that handle the almost unique model of police complaints handling within the North Yorkshire Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner also now handle both expressions of concern and expressions of appreciation in relation to the Fire and Rescue Service. The numbers of complaints received are pretty remarkably low. So, for example, in the period April to November 2022, I would say only 15 complaints were received. Of course, we might well take the view that one is too many, but they're nonetheless items of feedback from which the service can learn and develop. But overall, speaking in rough order of magnitude, we receive something in the order of twice as many expressions of appreciation as we do complaints. And I felt, Commissioner, and you may or may not agree, that in view of the topic that we've spent the first half hour or so of the meeting discussing, it might well just be a reminder of the extent to which our service is held in high regard by the public in general, but also that we do learn from customer services feedback overall as a fire and rescue authority. And I know that the Chief would make the same point in relation to the learning culture of the fire and rescue service, both from items of positive feedback and items of less positive feedback. So I hope that's a helpful summary to give at the close of this meeting.
Oh, thank you very much, Simon, and a good point to make. And I'd like to just add in any other business as well that, if there's anything, any comments, any questions, further questions that arise from the report that we've had today on HMIC, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. All my details are on my website. More than happy to have a conversation with you, and also the Chief Fire Officer would be happy to as well. So please get in touch with us. Okay. Right, so that takes us on to agenda item 8, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be February next month. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again in our February PAM, and I hope you have a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.